Have you heard about Machiavellianism? This is the 10th video in our series on identifying psychopaths and understanding psychopathy. Roxy, thanks for your question in the comments. You asked me to talk about Machiavellianism and the Dark Triad, which is a pretty trendy theory in psychology. It has been since 2002, actually. So I'll say a little bit about that. So let's start with the triad. This is a set of 3 characteristics that tend to show up with destructive people. So one of them is narcissism, which we've all heard about. And I've done, by the way, some of you are asking me in the comments, do videos on this. I can if you have a specific question, if I have time. But I've done bunches of videos on narcissism. Scroll back through if you want those. So Dark Triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, which I'll explain in a moment, and psychopathy. So they can overlap. There's research being done on how. So I have some concerns about this model, and one of them focuses on this supposed clinical entity called Machiavellianism. So what that means in plain language, Machiavellianism is when people are only out for their own advantage and they don't care who they step on to get it. So these are unscrupulous people who will do anything to get ahead in their own way, whatever they want. They tend not to have a conscience. They tend not to stick to any kind of morality. They're highly manipulative and deceitful. And so the term comes from Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote a book on statecraft called The Prince. And part of what he was talking about was hardball politics in the world of Italy of his time. So that's the term kind of went from there. The book isn't all about that, but the term Machiavellian comes from that. So my problem with this is that it's being treated as research psychology so often does, it's being treated as a separate trait rather than as a style of functioning or being. So I have yet to see an example of somebody who's a narcissistic personality in the clinical sense and somebody who is a psychopath in the sense of a genuine one or antisocial personality disorder or what have you, who doesn't display those characteristics of looking out for number one, selfishness, disregarding the rules, and all that stuff that Machiavellianism is supposedly about. I think what's happening is there is a general way of being that shows up in those 2 disorders, those 2 pathologies, that's being treated as a separate entity. I don't believe it is one. I think it's more a style that shows up in selfish and destructive people. So, trait theory and psychology, I used to teach history and systems, and it surfaces now and then. It caters to our need for oversimplified explanations. We like to see things very concretely because consciousness and subjectivity are so complicated and so interwoven with every element of what they are. We really like it when somebody says there's 3 kinds of people, or there's 2 kinds of this, or something like that, right? We like that. And, psychologists know this, and so they create these entities and schemas and models, and they go on the road with them. Some psychologists actually believe in the models. Others are doing it for publicity, unfortunately. Same as any field, right? So I don't have a lot of faith in the Dark Triad. What I do think is more useful is what I described in the second video of the series. I think it was the second one, where if we look at it as a spectrum of pathology, where on the less severe end are, let's say, people who are kind of vain and egotistical. So that's not a Dark Triad characteristic, but we all know people like that. We might be people like that. Not necessarily harmful, just a little self-preoccupied, perhaps. So that would be on the mild end. And then as you get worse, as you get more and more heavy biology, maybe genetics, as you get worse and worse upbringing, and also cultural forces play into this, then you eventually land at narcissism, full-on narcissism, which is destructive. Get worse still, more bad biology, more this, more that, and then you end up with a psychopath. So for now, I think that might be a better way of looking at all this. But the inquiry is ongoing, as it should be. So the right attitude to have about all of it is to keep an open mind and to be willing to look at the evidence and where it comes from and who's paying for it and what it seems to mean and whether there's more evidence. Single studies don't mean much, and just see where that takes us. Hope that helps.